In this lecture, we will be looking at the topic of centering the predictor variables in a multilinear regression. Let's recall our multilinear regression model we have as written here in equation 1, where the response is linearly regressed onto the p predictor variables x1 through xp. So our observations are n pairs, where we have each observation being an observation for the vector of predictor variables and the response. And we're going to now think about one element of that predictor vector. We'll call it xk, so the kth predictor. And we want to consider regressing the response onto xk minus its mean, mu k. And this often has a more natural interpretation than regressing y onto the predictor xk itself. And to do that, we center the predictors. So for each of the k's, for each of the predictors, we define the sample mean of the kth predictor as the sample estimate of mu k in the following way. Xk bar, notice this is just the average of all the observations, so going from I equals 1 to n, of that kth predictor. And we then define the centered predictor values as the following. So think of k as being fixed here. We take each observation of that kth predictor and subtract that sample mean for xk. Think of this as an adjustment to our observations. All we're doing is just taking the observations for xk and subtracting out the sample mean to get a new set of observations. This is just a shift in all the xk's by this constant, xk bar. And the idea here is that the regression intercept, when the predictors are centered in this way, beta naught can be interpreted as the conditional expectation of y, where each of the predictors are equal to the estimate of their mean from the sample. Without centering, that regression intercept beta naught is the conditional expectation of y, given that each of those predictors is equal to 0. And typically, we have a much more natural interpretation for this regression intercept with centering. It's much more natural to think about each of those predictors being centered at their mean than centered at 0. And so this is a very common and quick and easy transformation to make with the data so that we have a better interpretation for that regression intercept.